Hello, chess fans. It's November 14th, 2022. This is Sean from the E5 Outpost, a segment for adult chess improvers who want to keep aware of some of the latest ideas and events in the chess world. Today, we've got 3 stories from over the weekend that we're going to look at. First up, the Fall Chess Classic in St. Louis concluded. Yangyi came away as the winner. We'll take a look at his round 9 game against Grigoriy Oparin. Next, the Chess.com Speed Chess Championship qualifiers concluded over the weekend. David Pravian and Alexander Grischuk were the final 2 qualifiers. We'll take a look at one of Grischuk's games against Vladislav Artemiev to show how Grischuk was able to advance to the main event. Later, we'll talk about the Meltwater Chess Tour finals. We'll take a look at one of the games from earlier in the tour, and we'll get a brief look at the playing field for this tournament, which begins today. So the first game we'll go ahead and look at, this is from the Fall Chess Classic that just concluded in St. Louis. This is round 9 between Yangyi and Grigoriy Oparin. They played a Berlin, and it's actually pretty difficult to piece together where exactly Oparin went wrong in this game. I think that what happened was that he didn't exactly find the best place for his pieces to sit on. He plays bishop f6, probably anticipating playing e takes d4 at some point. The problem with a move like bishop f6 is that your knight can never return to f6 if it needs to. Your king side is actually a little bit difficult to defend here. This knight's also a little bit out of play. Obviously, black wanted to reroute to b6 and c4, but actually we find that this ends up being kind of a problem piece for black later. So play continues. Also, this ends up being a bit of a problem. Rook a to c8. White already has ideas of playing knight d2. At some point, white might want to play knight c4, followed by knight d6, and this actually is kind of difficult for black to deal with. So at this point, black had continued preparing this knight c4 idea by playing bishop b3. Now this square is covered, forcing black to play d5, which is not really a move that black wants to play. Black's pieces, especially this knight, are not really ideally placed for this board to open up. And we see that with a move like queen g4, white's continuing to develop, white's continuing to attack here. This knight is loose. Already this position is actually pretty tough for black to defend. White revealed, by playing e takes d5, revealed this weakness on e5, which became pretty much the theme for the rest of the game. White continuing to hammer on this pawn. White's going to double rooks here and continue to hammer on this pawn. Black sort of is not going to get any active play, and we see in this position that black's pieces already are quite passive, actually. These rooks are just tied to the defense of this pawn. This knight is just tied to the defense of this pawn. This bishop is just tied to the defense of this pawn. This queen is maybe the only good piece, the only potentially good piece that black has. But with the queen not supported by any other pieces, it's sort of hard to get anything going. Also, black can't even play a move like e takes d4 at this point because white's going to win a rook. So at this point, normally I think when you assess this position, you might say something like, well, black's king is a bit exposed. I'm probably going to win this pawn. So maybe I don't want to go ahead and exchange queens in this position. However, Yangyi correctly assesses that because this is black's only active piece. By exchanging pieces here, we see 1, 2, 3, 4 active pieces for white, 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces for black, whose sole purpose is to defend e4, or to defend e5. So white's already crushing in this position, and black tried to get some sort of counterplay. Black plays g5 at this point because he wants to avoid, like with a move like this, after takes, bishop takes, white is just up a pawn. White is just up a pawn. And this endgame is just so bad. It's very, very bad for black. This pawn is probably going to become weak at some point. The 2 bishops, two extra pawns for white. So this is sort of not an acceptable continuation. Instead of giving up the e-pawn, Oparin decides to give up the a-pawn. But as we see, even after these mass exchanges, the position is just not very good for black at all. In this position, black actually resigns. Again, this endgame is just no good for black. White has the 2 bishops. White has 2 passed pawns. this knight is going to have a hard time defending passed pawns in general. The light squares belong to white, and so it's going to be very, very easy to play moves like d5, d7 in the future. This king will just march in. With this game, Yangyi won the event with 6.5 points, a half point ahead of the field. Grigoriy finished clear second with 6 points, and Tai-Dai Van Nguyen finished clear third with 5.5. Alright, so next up, this weekend, the Chess.com Speed Chess Championship qualifiers concluded. You'll see on your screen now the full list of 16 qualifiers. David Pravian and Alexander Grischuk successfully ran the gauntlets and earned their spots for this event. We'll take a look at one of Grischuk's games against Vladislav Artemiev in the finals. This was from the 5+1 portion of the match. We'll go ahead and jump right into the endgame. The main features of this endgame, of course, are the different minor pieces. So white is going to attempt to attack weaknesses like maybe e6, maybe h5, the light squares, which are going to be supported by this light square bishop, though it's going to be sort of difficult for white to attack these weaknesses. This is already covered twice. And this weakness, it's not really clear how to maneuver the bishop in to get at h5. Meanwhile, black maybe is going to try to target f2, maybe going to try to target b2, maybe by maneuvering the knight like this, maybe like this. Though also it's not so clear how black is going to be able to make any progress. If you're maneuvering your knight here and I become too scared, I can just capture on d3 or e4, for example, and it's not really clear how you can continue to make progress. But we'll see actually that Artemiev plays sort of a blunder, which allows Grischuk to capitalize in a way by moving the knight in a route that's pretty unusual in this position. So we see knight e5, attempting to improve the position of this knight, rook c8, knight f3. So Grischuk's idea is actually to play knight g1, knight h3, and attack the pawn this way. And in this position, Artemiev plays, it's pretty much a blunder actually, bishop d3. The problem with this move is that now your king is overloaded. You can't defend both f2 and d3 without dropping the other one. So after Grischuk plays check, knight h3, you're in a pretty bad position. He plays the tactic, knight takes f2, you can't take back because this is falling. Now these weaknesses are a lot easier for black to attack. So instead, Artemiev played the desperado bishop takes f5. However, this was still not good for Artemiev. After moves like rook d2, rook takes b2, and king d4, we see this king is just so active. It's so ready to attack these weaknesses. This rook is so active, it's blocking this king from making any progress up the board. And this is sort of how you play rook endgames. You make sure that your king gets active, make sure that your rook gets active, and then at some point when you have passed pawns that you can push, you push those up the board. And so we see that that's exactly what happened in this game. In this position, Grischuk made the interesting decision, probably practical decision, to, instead of defending the e5 pawn and making your king's position a little bit worse, to already push the e pawn and to continue with so that way his king continued to have this great activity here. White just took the b pawn, and you see, because black's pieces were so well placed, he was able to just continue chopping all of white's pawns. Eventually they traded into this endgame, which is already a textbook win for black. These passed pawns are so separated, but this is also not a rook pawn. Black's pieces are so active. White's pieces are going to have a hard time capturing either of these pawns. And so the plan is just to push both of these pawns forward, and when white decides to commit to one of these pawns, promote the other pawn. And in this position, Artemiev resigned because it was clear that Grischuk was just going to be able to continue pushing these pawns and was going to be able to promote one of them while jettisoning the other one. And so Grischuk managed to win rather convincingly against Artemiev, and so he ended up as the final qualifier for the Speed Chess Champion event, which will take place on November 21st. Finally, the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour Finals begins today. The tour is a series of tournaments which includes Airthings Masters, Oslo Esports, FTX Crypto Cup, and the Julius Baer Generation Cup, of course, as well as the Meltwater Finals. The rules governing who gets selected to play in the finals is a bit confusing and convoluted. Of course, viewers are welcome to visit Meltwater Champions Chess Tour's website for themselves and try to figure out how the players ended up getting selected. But you'll see on your screen the final list of participants. Several names that are familiar to us, of course. The lowest rated player here is Pragnananda with an impressive 2678 rating. A lot of fantastic chess to look forward to here. So we'll go ahead and take a look at one of the games from one of the previous tournaments in this tour. This is from the Julius Baer Generation Cup. Vincent Keymer versus Magnus Carlsen. Vincent needs a win in this game in order to avoid elimination. Magnus, of course, can just get away with a draw and move on to the next round. And so they played in English. This was actually an unusual opening for Vincent. He had been not doing well in the openings that he had already prepared, and so he played something that he had not done much preparation for in order to try to throw Magnus off of his game. But we see after the opening, Magnus actually just gets an excellent position. Here, it doesn't really matter if you play queen takes c6. The point of this position is that black is always going to have the b file here. Black is going to play moves like bishop f5, rook b8, and the b1 square is just extremely weak, actually. And there's not really much that you can do to contest this file. And this sort of ended up being the story of the entire game, right? So bishop f5, this bishop, it's surprising, ends up having no targets for most of this game. This bishop ends up just being bad, not having anything to do. This bishop will play to e3, this knight will play to e4. Sorry, this bishop will play to d3, knight plays to e4. And black just achieves a dominating position. You can't even play like a move like rook c2 to try to get onto the b file at this point. Black's also going to get pressure pretty soon on f2 potentially. You can't play a move like this because I'm going to play here. Right, so it's already very, very difficult for Vincent to find any moves here. At this point, he actually just jettisons the exchange in an attempt to get activity down the b file. We'll see Magnus allows the exchange, but also it's even with this exchange, white doesn't succeed in getting any activity at all. Magnus maybe could have played more forcefully by playing a move like h4, for example. I know that when I was watching the commentators were suggesting some piece sacrifices at some point. Magnus preferred to play a little bit calmer and just retreat, solidify the b file, and then continue the attack down the king side. Right, so this position, right, Magnus just took control of the b file. You can see that Vincent's pieces are all very passively placed, very, very difficult for them to find any activity. And then after Magnus had secured the b file, he brought the queen back over. He's going to attempt operations once again on the king side. Right, now this rook has infiltrated on the first rank. Vincent sort of had no choice. He tried to get activity by playing the weakening move f3, kicking this knight back, but it just weakens Vincent's position too much. Already there's so much pressure on e3. We see black eventually able to break through. Knight f5, forcing white to make some choice of what to do with this pawn. White plays e4 in an attempt to defend and get counterplay down the center. Black actually returns the exchange, offers to return the exchange with rook takes e4. The idea is that if you play bishop takes e4, I'm playing queen takes, and this second rank is looking very, very tender for you. Vincent decides not to go down this line, instead plays bishop f4. He wants to get some sort of activity down the b file and maybe pin this queen and win it. Magnus actually allows this by playing rook e2. He finds this great combination at the end of the game to secure the victory. He allows rook b8 because he sees that after rook takes g2, king h1, queen takes b8, bishop takes, followed by these rook checks, white is just completely lost. If you play a move like king takes g2, rook takes c1, this endgame is completely lost for white. You're just up a rook. This pawn is falling. These pawns are going to have a very easy time advancing. I can just sacrifice this knight for this pawn at some point and say, I don't care, I'm queening. And so with this victory, Magnus actually had secured, had been able to advance into the final round where he defeated Arjun Ergaisi in short order with a number of games that were also very, very fun to analyze. All right, that's your chess coverage for today. We'll be back with more news and analysis for tomorrow. Until then, this is Sean from the E5 Outpost. See you later, chess world.